My name is Chelsea Harry. I teach at Southern Connecticut State University. I came here for the Nishon Forum, but principally for the Confucius-Aristotle Symposium. We have a wealth of philosophical dialogue here in China this summer, so it's really exciting. What do I hope to achieve here? This is an inter-philosophical comparative type dialogue that's trying to harness ancient wisdom to address contemporary issues.
You know, I noticed from learning about you that you were trying to expand the philosophical catalog.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember from studying Aristotle is that he actually created a lot of the philosophical categories that we use today. He isolated it into rhetoric and all these different topics. When you talk in your own work about expanding the philosophical catalog and meta-philosophy, where are you going with that? What can we add to the philosophical dialogue?
Probably a lot, but my personal interests and the interests of others who share my own interests are to include other voices. So Aristotle, for example, is a principal voice in the philosophical canon, the Western philosophical canon, but he obviously had influence all over the world. So expanding the philosophical canon for me means retrieving voices that were left out, usually due to socio-political reasons, and principally women is what is my focus. So I've done a lot of work on the ancient Greek philosopher Safo. I consider her a philosopher. Many consider her a homoerotic poet, principally, lyric poet, but I think there's a lot of we don't even have a lot of her material, but that's very true of many ancient, early Greek philosophers. We just have these fragments to go on. But if we're going to take the fragments of, for example, Thales, the first ancient Greek philosopher who, we say he's the first because he supposedly predicted a solar eclipse in 585 BCE, and he's living at the same time as Safo. So we have these fragments from him, we have these fragments from Safo, and Safo is doing something very different than what Thales was doing. Her theme is different, but I think she's also looking for truth in a really interesting way. And so looking at voices that maybe weren't doing the exact same thing as philosophers that we recognize, maybe aren't doing it the exact same way, like in the methodos or the method that Aristotle developed, but still had something to say, were still pursuing truth in their own way, I want them to be considered philosophers. And I want them to be considered philosophers because that means going forward, other young people can feel like they too can be philosophers, looking at many different themes in many different ways, practical issues, issues about relationships, whatever somebody's interested in pursuing truth about, I want them to feel like they too are philosophers. And if we have these examples from history, it makes it a lot easier to sell.
When I was studying Hume and Kant, one of the things that my professor told me was that Hume was overlooked until Kant picked Hume up and said, hey, this is really actually quite important. So I really appreciate what you're doing. This is your first trip to China.
Yes.
What have you thought so far about coming here?
I've been really surprised. I don't even know at this point what I thought to expect from a trip to China. I was honestly a little bit nervous. The visa process was more laborious than, I travel a lot, but I haven't gone through a visa process where I had to make multiple trips to the consulate, for example, in person. And so I was a little bit nervous coming here. But my experience has been wonderful. I'm a vegetarian, and everyone told me you're gonna have a horrible time in China. So I packed all these protein bars in my luggage because I didn't think I would eat for the duration of time I'm here. And I'm finding every meal I've had has been incredible with all these vegetables. And today I was eating sea sponge that, these foods I've never even seen before, I didn't know about. And that is completely surprising to me because in the United States, we have a large Chinese population. I thought that I'd eaten a lot of authentic Chinese food, but no, there's all this Chinese food I haven't had, and I really find it's mostly vegetables. So I'm eating very well. So thank you, China, and thank you to our hosts. And the other thing that I didn't expect was all the electric vehicles. And I don't know this for sure. I've only talked to people, but my colleagues have told me that in China, electricity is cheaper than in the United States, and that there are car companies here that aren't able to be imported in the United States because of fiscal reasons and political reasons. So I really like the BYD cars that I'm seeing. I've never seen those before. I really like how quiet the streets are. And of course, everybody's been extremely friendly, extremely nice and hospitable. So I've had an entirely positive experience.
This forum in particular is about appreciating one another's cultures. It's in China, so there's a very Confucian-heavy theme about it. But my question really is, if we're globally looking at what's going to create global peace between nations, how does appreciating one another's cultures globally translate into the possibility of sustained peace? What do you think about that?
So this is a great question, and actually this is something that I pick up, this is a point that I make from Aristotle. So for me, the way I read Aristotle, the way I understand Aristotle, is that he was an immensely curious person. I mean, maybe the most curious person who's ever lived. He wanted to know other people, he wanted to know about other animals, he wanted to know about plants. There's no other way to explain, 200 plus treatises on everything, including inventing biology, zoology, botany with his colleague Theophrastus, etc. So he's this immensely curious person, and I think he developed a true respect for other life by being curious and by getting to know other people, and I've written on this. And so this is something that I think we really, really need to take to heart. We need to know each other. We need to travel to each other's lands. We need to be able to. So many people can't travel with the passports that they have. They don't have the privilege of the finances to travel. We need to be able to travel or to meet each other somehow to really understand each other's cultures. I think that knowledge leads to respect.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, thank you.